Hi, David Toulis. Our show is Nuganomics.com. We cover local economy and the free market every day here at the Copperhead station from 1 to 3. Our station is the little station that could. It is not a media giant. It is not a corporation with many private or even public shareholders. Privately owned, run by individuals who like acting in their individual and personal capacity. Individuals who realize that that they also have avatars, which are this separate legal entity that traipses after them and is a form through which governments, creditors, corporations, email marketers, and others attach themselves to the real person. We're concerned about that shadow figure that we all have. We are all corporations today. It is inevitable because risk has been socialized. Risk has been socialized to the public fisc, to the public treasury, if you will. And the public treasury, through that socialization process, claims ownership in all people and all things, virtually all property. And we are the poorer for it. But I think we can, if we understand local economy and understand the Christian work ethic that Weber talked about back in the 1930s in his sociological study of the rise of capitalism. If we understand the work ethic and the care of the other, that comes out of Christianity. If we understand that and understand, even though you may not be a Christian, if we understand how that works, we are going to be better for it because it gives us a better understanding of how the world works. Our show is about capital, and I just wanted to remind you that if you are looking for a new car, you need to go and shop at Capital Toyota on Lee Highway. Capital Toyota, maker of the seller of the best made car, the car that lasts 300,000 miles, the car that's an investment. Go to Capital Toyota. Our show is about capital, and I have been in a desperate funk the past couple of days. I have just had this sense of dismay. I have felt sort of humiliated in my life as a dad, as a writer, as a journalist. I've just been befuddled. I have had a kind of a bad mood at home that has not endeared me to my family members, my wife or my sons. And I had just late this morning, it occurred to me, there was one, it is a spiritual problem, of course, that God deals with me upon, but it also is something of an intellectual despair and a sense of not seeing beyond the tide of bad news, the tide of evil tidings that people such as the McKamey family that runs this car dealership, or, well, let's say the Thompson family that runs another business here in town in Middle Valley that cleans out duct work, or the man that runs the pizza shop here in Hickson. People like that, common people, there are things that are going to roll over them and me, right? We're all commoners. We're all kind of yeomen. We're none of us are aristocrats. I don't suppose you are. You are, after all, listening to AM radio, right? Copperhead AM, and you're the guy who loves NASCAR. So you and I are alike. I'm the slow man of Chattanooga, and you are the yeoman, the commoner, the average American who likes his beer and his hunting and fishing, and who owns a little boat with an outboard motor that's colored green like the hull, though the motor doesn't have quite as much rust as the hull does at this moment. You need to take care of that. Well, the reason I'm in despair is Arizona and Texas. Of course, you know what that's about. And the crisis that the country faces is one that really is about local economy. My theory is that we face crises, plural, on several important fronts. There was a financial crisis ahead. We have an overly financialized, extraordinarily leveraged national economy, leveraged in the sense of having too much debt. We have a deep state that seems to be sleeping over the pending demise of all the outward forms that are very familiar to us, that have been in the news columns since the First World War. And there are, we're not sure, we're not sure, I'm not sure whether to argue for inflation or deflation. One writer I read a couple days ago made a strong argument that the deep state won't allow for a hyperinflation that seems to be building up in the internal organs of the Federal Reserve System. So that's a major crisis that of which we saw evidence in 2008 in the meltdown, and there were ones previous to that as well. There is another crisis that is cultural, and we could say, if we're going to put a face on it, it is the face of Chris Anderson, the city council members. Chris Anderson is homosexual, openly living with a man. Of course, he's not married to this man. He can't possibly be in our state. But he got his council colleagues to pass an ordinance that gives marital benefits, if you will, to non-marital live-in, love-in lovers of both kinds, who, if one of them is a staffer on the city payroll. And he's facing a recall election. He has sued to stop the recall election because of, at least one technical defect in the petition, which has a 15-day window for repair. And then also the fact that at least one person in the recall effort is a Christian who, because he's a Christian, has by virtue of his religious faith a discriminatory purpose. And for the Election Commission to approve of the recall petition, that becomes an oppressive act, because that one activist in the recall effort, George Goss could be one. There are others. He's a Christian man, part-time minister. That Christian idea of the law of God controlling how sex is used makes this whole effort illegitimate, and the Election Commission's activity in favor of allowing the second step of the process to go forward, making that oppressive and discriminatory, and thus illegal, right, unconstitutional. So this other warfare is cultural, and it is also legal. Yesterday, a U.S. district judge in Texas ruled that the recognition of Texas, the Texas legislature, and the people of Texas, of marriage as being between one man and one woman, the decision is 48 pages, is discriminatory, illicit, and illegal, and shares in an official hatred of a distinguished and distinct class of people, the homosexuals of that state, who are required to have special protection under the 14th Amendment, what's called equal protection, right? The equal protection comes under, I think it's the Fifth Amendment and all through the 14th Amendment. So there is this. You have to understand what's happening here, and I'm going to try to give you a sketch of this whole situation. And I want you to remember that the local economy solution to the gay problem, it is a problem, and it will be an increasing problem, and there will be the wave will crest next year, possibly as the shares are at their peak now. The gay share, the value of the gay share, it's at its peak, and the actual cresting of the graph, if you will, the valuation graph, may be when the High Court, SCOTUS it's called, Supreme Court of the United States, SCOTUS for short, that's the journalistic shorthand. SCOTUS will rule that there is no such thing as a marriage exclusive to man and woman, and that marriage needs to accept other variants, to accept the outliers that are now understood to be involved in crimes against nature or acts against nature that were thrown out in 2003 by Texas versus Lawrence by the Supreme Court, that said sodomy cannot be illegal. Sodomy is in fact the exercise of a right. But there's a coming backlash, and and we need to understand. Well, let me just suggest. I'm going to just have to suggest this and try to develop the point. There will be a backlash that has two elements that I want to mention to you. One will be after the crest in 2005 with that. If the High Court rules rules in favor of the gay theory and destroys federalism one more time. Federalism, of course, is the understanding of the feudal or covenantal arrangement among the states with its federal agent. The states have sovereignty, and if that sovereignty, as it's called, is overturned, and states are no longer allowed to say anything about marriage at all, and all their regimes for statutory marriage are overturned, well, then you have great chaos in society. You'll have great chaos legally. There will be unimaginable complexities in the law and in understanding what is true, what is not true, what is right, what is wrong, what is illegal. Inheritances will be found up. Legitimacy will be screwed over. There will be all kinds of estate problems, transfer problems, and there will be the law will become an instrument of education in a whole new way. People will be forced to understand that marriage is not between man and woman. The law will be, in its pedagogical effects, in its teaching effects, the law will be immensely destructive of capital and the moral value, the fabric, the moral capital that people have as being good, right? Your virtue as a man, my listener, is a form of capital. Your obedience to God's law, even though you may not believe in God, your obedience to his law is a form of social capital. And if marriage is redefined, which is what the gays want to redefine marriage to include homosexual acts, so that people who engage in sodomy, as it's called, and other forms of sexual innovation, their customs they want to be enshrined in law, and they can say we commit to be married, and they would like, and as Jerry Mitchell agrees with this. Jerry Mitchell agrees that all these forms of sexual deviance, if you will, they become part of the norm. There is no deviance anymore. In fact, there will be a strong urge, though I think it will peter out in 3 or 4 years after this happens, to make deviant someone like you, who makes a statement about marriage being only between a man and a woman. Your statement will be, if they can get their way, formulated as a kind of hate speech. So we have that. So the two backlash points that I want to mention is that really wasn't it. One of them will be an incredible hatred against homosexuals. There will be so much anger at them for what has happened. Remember, the homosexual lobby is 1% of the 1%. Most people are normal like you. You're a man. You are married to a woman. You would never think of having sexual relations with a man. You would never think of enshrining your private oddity as marriage if you were prone that way. And the 1% of the 1% that have brought these cases with much public sympathy, the public being misled by emotional talk, emotional arguments about inequality and oppression and so on. These people will become the objects of incredible hatred. And that will be, there's a legal revolution in their favor, but meantime, in the streets, if you will, in the coffee shops, in the job market, the homosexual theory will suddenly go into deep, deep discount. In other words, you will not be able to openly admit your homosexuality, and Chris Anderson could not ever conceivably be elected in this future backlash period, which could last for a long time. Okay, so that's backlash number one will be that. Backlash number two is a very interesting idea that occurred to me this morning as I was laboring over my computer and my work at Nuganomics.com. My name is David Toulis, by the way. Thank you for joining me. You are listening to us here at Copperhead 1240. Copperhead 1240, the little AM station that could. And local economy is our theme here at Nuganomics.com. I'm your editor, David Toulis, and the host of Nuganomics.com. I'm a family man, a former newspaper editor, having worked almost 25 years as an editor at the Times Free Press and handled the business pages for that organ of the official press for 14 or 15 years, since the merger of the old Times and News Free Press. And the backlash has another important element, and I want to just talk about that, and that will be in local economy. How will local economy discover the solution to the marriage imbroglio? Because it will be, if the High Court rules in favor of gays, it will be an imbroglio, a catastrophe. It will be a legal tsunami. You could compare a verdict favoring the homosexual theory as something like a neutron bomb going off in the legal realm. And there will be, it has potentially military revolutionary aspects, as there will be people so outraged at this, they will take up arms against the government in some places, maybe in states such as Idaho and Montana, maybe Oklahoma, but probably not here. The other backlash will be in the resurgence of local economy on the following point: that you, my listener, and maybe not you, of course, you're a married man with a wife and children, and you have a mortgage and a bass boat. Your son and your daughters, if they have to live through this catastrophe, will understand that they will be needing to marry at common law. Marriage at common law is something that will gain a resurgence, and here's why. Common law marriage is local economy marriage. Common law marriage comes from acts by individuals apart from the state. Now, we have to understand that if the High Court rules against marriage, if it tries to, it will redefine marriage legally. The marriage it's redefining is not all marriage. You understand that, right? It's redefining only a certain class of marriage, and that would be one that is called statutory marriage. And statutory marriage is the one that is found described as a state monopoly, a cartel owned by the Tennessee state government. Tennessee, in Nashville, with its General Assembly and its executive branch, the governor, Governor Haslam, Tennessee pretends to own marriage. It has made, years ago, back in, I think, the late 1700s, maybe early 1800s, it took over marriage. It did so to prevent miscegenation, which is to say marriage among the races, or between the black and the white race. That was why Tennessee took over marriage and effectively forbade marriage by right. Now, that's a point. I say that knowing that it could be disputed by a smart attorney, but effectively, common law marriage is not recognized in Tennessee. Now, it is recognized in Alabama. And if you want to read about that, go to Nuganomics.com. I published an essay last year when President Obama finally changed his mind about marriage. And I had this piece building up in me for a long time, and I finally wrote it. And it explains what common law marriage is. Common law marriage is not just shacking up with someone. Okay, people who shack up with each other, they're not married. Common law marriage is something that in local economy you can enjoy. Common law marriage is marriage by right. And where do you get that right from? Okay, well, you get marriage from God. Okay, God gave Adam and Eve in marriage. They were united in one flesh in the garden and had many, many children, and of course lived hundreds of years. And so they had many, 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 many children, just like the Duggars, except maybe not, except many more than Mr. and Mrs. Duggar with their, I think they have 18. But marriage is a creational ordinance. Okay, it is part of creation. It did not evolve. It came from God directly to man, and was given to him as a blessing. Eve, according to the Genesis narrative, having been made from the rib of Adam, she came second to help him. That's the order of creation. Woman is created to help man, and so when a man marries a wife, it is so that she can help him in his calling. That's why he picks her, because she's not just lovely, she's not just sexy, she's not just someone who wants to have his babies for him and take care of his house. She wants to help him because she knows he's important. She knows he's good. She knows that he's a valuable man in the marketplace, in his field, in his calling. So that's why he marries her. And so marriage, it belongs to creation. It does not belong to the church. It does not belong to the state. It does not. It belongs to you. You, my listener, own marriage. Why? Because you're a man, and you do not have to ask permission to marry. However, when Tennessee adopted, back in the 17 and 1800s, marriage as its own ordinance, taking it from God effectively, taking it from the people of Tennessee, it created a monopoly because, and the monopoly works like this. If you have a common law marriage that you've established and you might say erected in Tennessee, which does not recognize common law marriage, you can't have the state's aid in handling a divorce or an estate because the state will not recognize your having been married at common law in Tennessee, right? Again, because it doesn't recognize common law marriage. But if you, say, contract your marriage in Bridgeport, Alabama, there in a church or even a parking lot there with public witnesses and so on, you have a marriage recognized in Tennessee. So Tennessee does not allow marriages to be contracted at common law in the border, but it does recognize common law marriages enacted in common law marriage states. So, but the reason, what I'm trying to say is, if you don't have a state marriage license, there are all kinds of conveniences that are not allowed to you, okay? There are all kinds of privileges of recognition of your union not allowed to you by judges, say in a divorce case or an inheritance case, which would be probate. So, marriage was taken over by the state as a convenience to its people. Originally, marriage was simply recorded by the state, but then the states, all of them, started pretending that they owned marriage. And in fact, if you read the Tennessee law as I have, it is said that in the case that I write about at newgonomics.com, that marriage has a municipal interest, and the state has an interest in your marriage. But that means if you marry in Tennessee under license, it's a three-party union. The state is the key party, because without the state's role, you could not marry your sweetheart. So you have a three-party marriage, a tripartite marriage. Three parties. The principal is the state. You are one half, your wife is the other half, and the state is the enabler. So that's true legally because the state owns marriage, right? The state owns the marriage. All right, here's the question. What happens if the gay theory wins the high court and marriage is redefined? Well, there'll be harassment of Christians. There'll be all kinds of harassment of business people who have religious objections to serving flamboyant poofters who come to their shops and demand service at the counter. And there will be a return of common law marriage because I assure you that men of principle will not want to marry under statute if that statute allows something illegal and unlawful, even criminal, to be a state function. Marriage, statutory marriage being a state function. So that's the second backlash. There will be a return to common law marriage, a return to local economy marriage, where people live out their lives under God and exercise their rights. And you have a right to a wife, right? If your proposed wife says yes to you in marriage, then you, if you're not married now, you have a right to marry her before God and before men. So what's happened is the state, if the gays win, Tennessee will lose its cartel authority, its monopoly authority, local economy, you and your rights. You will be able to reassert yourselves. You can become a real man again. You don't have to ask the state for permission to marry. So in the disaster, a flower blossoms.
Network, the voice of NASCAR. And for ticket information, go to MRN.com. Check it out this Sunday live on Chattanooga's official NASCAR radio station. Copperhead 12-3. Get 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate on a 2014 Camry. This is unheard of. 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate on a new 2014 Camry. You have to get the Capital Toyota on Lee Highway. Get 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate on a 2014 Camry. 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate. Capital Toyota on Lee Highway with a safety too that much better.
When you're up there, guys, when you're the South said he's passed, gone to another place. She left us. Death is so much more than a crying time, but we have to deal with it. You want a funeral home that helps you get through your ordeal. You want a professional, but not one who lacks warmth or sincerity. I'm Josh Cherish. That's what I offer at Hamilton Funeral Home and Cremation Services in Tucson. Care for you. A local
Hey, Russell, can you help me find my glasses? Oh, never mind. Here they are. Never mind.
The life of Mother's Day. Just call 531-3975. This is Josh. Again, the number is 531-3975. Hamilton Funeral Home. Oh, one more thing. Love your neighbor. Buy local. You feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold,
so you got
water, and road damage are prime causes for indoor air quality. Ducts, indoor air professionals, better known as duct busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable duct buster steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality contributors to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Jake and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, indoor air professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
Hi, my name is Bruce Krebs with the Entrepreneur Source. I help people who want to be self-employed. I help my clients through a very fact-based and analytical process to understand all the criteria that's important to them. I then help them look at franchises or businesses that fit their criteria. Once my clients find the right opportunity, I help them find the best way to finance the business, including paying themselves for the startup phase. If you're just curious to understand the types of businesses that may be right for you, please call me for a free assessment. My phone number is 423-875-5621.
Recent changes out of Washington turn to DJ Pelton Tax Service to help. Professional advice, confidential service, fair prices, someone to trust all year long. Call 332-3339. These are tax professionals and they're waiting to serve you. Or visit us at 10327 Daisy Pike in Saudi Daisy, across from the fire hall. Another office is on Brainerd Road. We guarantee our work. Call 332-3339. Online at djpelton.com. Think ahead.
Get the latest news and information now. On your Twitter account, search Hot News Radio. That's Hot News Radio. For the latest news and information, go to Hot News Radio. That's Twitter.com. Then search Hot News Radio. Hot News Radio is a service of Copperhead 1240.
Hi, David Toulis. Our show is Nuganomics.com. I'm glad you are giving me a few minutes of your time. I have been in a very deep spiritual and intellectual hole the past couple of days. You might call a kind of despair. A despair at the sense of an overwhelming gain by people who care nothing for the family, for capital, who really care nothing about the future, who are interested only in the license to spend. Now, I'm talking not just about homosexuals. I'm talking about the American consumer, the American banking sector, the federal government, even our Republican governor in Nashville. He wants to spend, 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 and have you, the taxpayer, give a free community college education for every graduate of an official high school. And there is, in the gills of my heart, if you could call them that, there has been a kind of buildup of a kind of film, a kind of a hardening film, like the chocolate cream that you pour over your ice cream, and it makes a kind of thick crust on the outside of your scoops. Well, that's kind of what seems to have built up over my heart in the past couple of days. I've just been moody, unpleasant, ungracious, and unkind. But I don't let that get in the way of our getting together. Thank you for joining me for a couple of minutes here today. Our show is Nuganomics.com. We're at the Copperhead 1240 station, and just before me is Generation Z. By the way, you should tune in before I come on and hear Russell digress every day, every weekday on tech questions from a libertarian and free market perspective. Very useful show, brings a lot to the table. Also wanted to know that in the heart of the men who run Hamilton Funeral Home, a locally owned and locally operated funeral home here in Hickston, there is only genuine care for the hearts of grieving families here in the area. This business is owned by Josh Jennings and a partner, local men, and they provide a great service. When they came on the scene, I think it was last year, the national chains on either side of Hamilton Funeral Home had to cut prices sharply to compete with the local provider. The number is 531-3975. That's 531-3975. If you need accounting services, you need tax returns done, it's now the season. Do call a local provider of this service, an accounting business, E.J. Pelton Accounting, E.J. Pelton Company. Eric Pelton has been in this field for 37 years. He is a CPA and does tax returns, does books for businesses, and a great service. There's a very active office for E.J. Pelton in Saudi Daisy, just north of the Bilo on Dayton Pike. It's the Brainerd number is 622-3156. That's 622-3156, ejpelton.com online. My name is David Toulis, and we are here talking about local economy. And the argument that I want to look back in history. When I was thinking about the Texas decision yesterday, and also the veto of the Arizona governor of a one-page bill that recognizes the right of religious expression, the right of religious perspectives in the world of business. That bill was vetoed. So that under laws of commerce in Arizona, there can be a new element of coercion used by people who can, in the law, find cause to harass, oppress, and dismay Christians, people of other religious stripes in their business, because the protections in the law that was overturned, or the bill that was overturned, would have protected religious minorities. And you have to understand that though you're not a Christian, in one sense Christians are a minority, of course. In another sense, they are the majority. And so I'm not sure when to use which figure. But the Texas ruling in favor of homosexuals being allowed to, a decision of 48 pages that would redefine marriage to include homosexuals as married, just like you and your wife, is part of a revolution from within. And it's a revolution long in the making. It is going to be very destructive. And this morning, I'm a man that has at least one or two books handy in my house, in my library, and I make use of them. So when I was thinking about this decision yesterday, I thought, okay, I need to think about Antonio Gramsci, who was a Marxist, an Italian communist, who was a dissenter in the Marxist world, and he was ousted from places of influence. But he had he had a theory, what we could call cultural revolution. And in other words, Marxism prevails not by organs of the state, not by Stalinism with its gulags, its firing squad, the 9 grams to the forehead, as they were called. He checked off your name on a list of 50 pages of names, and he would give one big check at the bottom. If you were on that page, your check mark was checked, and you got 9 grams to the brain, the front of the head. The Soviet Union did not make a lot of fuss about getting rid of undesirables. But in that time, Gramsci was the dissenter from that idea of state-imposed revolution. And he had the theory that is operative today. Though Marxism is a dead letter in many respects, the gay lobby, through community organizing and litigation, has sought to bring, not in way it's cultural through the institutions of church and school and family, but it's also coercive through the power of judges in litigation. So Gramsciism has a lot of success, though Marxism on the whole seems to be discredited. And as I was thinking about that, I said, well, I've got to go back to I've got to go back to some of the foundational thinkers of the gay argument. And Friedrich Nietzsche was one, or is one, and to find out a little bit more about him, I went to a very important volume of history. Well, Jean Edward Veith is one. He's a Lutheran writer and a philosopher and historian. He's written several books that I would say are just outstanding. And one of them is Modern Fascism. And what we have, the fascist revolution is, we've been subject to the fascist revolution since the war to prevent Southern independence, though it accelerated in the progressive era in the 1880s and made giant leaps forward, penetrating much of the American economy and American life in the 1930s. So fascism is something which, in a nutshell, you could say fascism is when government owns all the economy, but people have nominal ownership of factories, businesses, software developers. In other words, they own it on paper and they control it, but in the end, the government sort of calls the shots as to what is produced and how people are compensated. And that's what fascism is. Americans have a kind of fascistic system, though it's not often recognized. It's often called progressive. And progressive is, of course, a very disarming and useful word. If you use that word, you're not going to make a left-winger or a statist upset. He'll think you understand his motives, right? And those are the things that matter the most. Well, I was reading Veith, Modern Fascism, Liquidating the Judeo-Christian Worldview is the subtitle. And I went naturally down my shelf to another book called The Pink Swastika, Homosexuality in the Nazi Party. And I'm trying to get back to Nietzsche, right? Because Nietzsche is the man who devised the will to power idea in many ways in the modern times. And so what I want to do is look a little bit at what is effectively a form of deconstruction. Deconstruction is a literary theory that is promoted by people who lived at the time of the Weimar Republic, and later Paul de Man was one. He was a kind of a Nazi, but when he saw what Nazism really was about, he turned into a great critic of it. But he devised the ideas of what's called deconstruction. And there's another man whose name you may not have heard of, Jacques Derrida, another philosopher. And among the Americans, the notables would include Stanley Fish. I'm trying to remember where he teaches, but one of his main books is 40 years ago or so called "Is There a Textbook in This Class?" or is there a textbook in this class? And the idea of these men is that they can deconstruct books, they can deconstruct poems, speeches, the Bible, and the deconstruction of the Bible began in the 1800s with the German higher critics, as they were called, and they came up with the understanding that the Bible was just a conflation of texts put together by various editors. Okay, they were not written by men such as James or John or Luke or Moses. These are just compilations, and there is a mythos. There was a myth about the Bible's production, and we just have to pierce that myth to know what the Bible really says, because then we'll know what it really says because we know who really wrote it, right? Even though they are left only with speculations as to the authorship of the books of the Bible. So deconstruction is a kind of a high-end literary theory, but it comes. But the judge in the Texas decision is a deconstructionist, and essentially what has happened is that the strength of local economy, the strength of capital, human capital, is deliberately misunderstood. It is deliberately falsified. It is looked at as if it were incoherent, and that is. I printed out the ruling, and I kind of late in the morning. I didn't have time to find all the right passages. But in a story in lifesitenews.com, there's a pop quote from the ruling, and here this is deconstruction in action. It's also, of course, a kind of virulent bigotry in action from the pen of the clerks and the judge Orlando Luis Garcia, the U.S. District Judge for Western Texas. He says, the Supreme Court precedent prohibits states from passing legislation born out of animosity against homosexuals, has extended constitutional protection to the moral and sexual choices of homosexuals, and prohibits the federal government from treating state-sanctioned opposite-sex marriages and same-sex marriages differently. And his ruling pretends to overturn a constitutional amendment in Texas approved by 76% of the voters. It was called Proposition 2, and it was passed in 2005 and subsequently put into the statute books of Texas. Tony Perkins, president of the Family Research Council, says the state of Texas is the latest victim of a judicial free-for-all in making a lawless mockery of the ideals that our founding fathers stood for. A court-imposed redefinition of marriage strips away the fundamental right to self-governance. This is not just an attack on marriage, but an attack on the rule of law. And he goes on to say, hopefully the court will refrain from repeating the disaster of Roe v. Wade, the abortion decision, by imposing a radical minority view on the nation. Instead, we would expect the Supreme Court to restore order by returning to the people and their elected representatives the right to decide the future of marriage. Well, he's right. Mr. Perkins is appealing to the vision of federalism, in which many things belong to the states. Police powers, for example, are municipal power belongs in the states and to the states, not the federal government. And marriage has always been in the provenance, in the control, the jurisdiction of the increasing number of states, and now there are 50 states, and they have authority over marriage, to define offenses against it, to define what crimes are and what virtues are. But there is great hope among the Chris Davises, the Chris Andersons of the world, the Jerry Mitchells of the world, the city councilman who was the swing vote in the illicit and illegal ordinance in Chattanooga. By the way, if you want to find out about the ordinance in Chattanooga and its legal standing, the only place you'll find any analysis of it is with me, David Toulis, your editor here at Nuganomics.com. On my website, I explain and explore in some detail the proposition that I make that the ordinance giving homosexual lovers employee benefits and insurance coverage for city workers is an act ultra vires. Ultra vires is Latin, and it means outside the view, outside the scope of authority of Chattanooga, which is a municipal corporation, wholly beholden to the General Assembly, its rules, policies, perspectives, opinions through its charter, and its charter makes no grant of authority from the legislature to our municipal corporation to establish this legal novelty, which is called in the ordinance a domestic partnership. The domestic partnership is a legal fiction to begin with, and it's doubly fictitious because the town fathers, Jerry Mitchell, one of them, have no legal authority to do that. They've not been granted that power. It resides solely with the General Assembly. And no media outlet in Chattanooga except me, a single guy, one man with a couple of books in a library and a computer, a Mac. I'm the only one making this point. No one else has said it, no one else has explored it, but you, my listener. And there's another man, one man, who's my reader, right? You two guys know this story, you too. So, you are a minority person in what you know. And it's important to understand that real knowledge, valuable knowledge of the kind that I hope I'm imparting here on our show, is meant for key people only. Not everybody. I mean, not everybody can understand what you understand, right? With my help, I hope. We understand things a little differently. We have a perhaps more penetrating gaze in the world that's really out there. Well, about Gramsci, to say something about him first, in the Episcopal Church you have the Book of Common Prayer, which says, in part, imprint upon our hearts such a dread of thy judgments and such a grateful sense of thy goodness, referring to God, to us, as may make us both afraid and ashamed to offend thee. offend thee. Now, what we have in our day is we have another God who's easily offended, right? God in heaven is offended, but forbearing. The God of our day that Antonio Gramsci helped develop is not as patient as the real one, of course. And the reason is that God is gracious, but our establishment in politics and law is politically correct. We have to ask permission of the God of the state before we do otherwise lawful things, like marry. Well, and why do we do that? Well, we have such a dread of the judgment of the state. We dread offending the officials. We are afraid to speak out against the reigning shibboleths of political correctness. We are ashamed to offend them, according to a nice discussion on this writer by Franklin Sanders, the money changer. He says, where would your friends be then? He said, we live in fear and dread of shame. Of what? The idols that rule us, and those who do not obey them are punished, as you all know. The revolutionary faithful, then, the great mass of the people, will turn their backs on them so that those shunned can expect no help, never mind making a living. It is a kind of secular excommunication. Now, this is a man who fought the good people in court and defeated them. The people sided with him in a major case. He says, Gramsci was the Marxist who helped found the Italian Communist Party. He became a Marxist heretic after a visit to the Soviet Union in the early 1920s. There he saw the Soviet communist system remained an ideology alien to the people and imposed by force. Existing Russian loyalties and values, he concluded, would never accept socialism. So he returned to Italy and proposed that the socialist revolution lead not through the party's political leadership, but through cultural leadership, what he called reshaping consciousness in society. So he became a heretic among Marxists. He denied that economics determines culture. He asserted that culture determines economics and politics. But he didn't really stop there. If the culture were changed so as to make socialism acceptable, the revolution would occur naturally. And in fact, changing culture to the extent that everyone thought as a socialist and approved socialist ideals, that would be the revolution. And of course, in his mind, socialism has to replace Christianity as the source of values. So what's yesterday's heresy becomes today's Marxist orthodoxy. We live in a Gramscian paradise. And the High Court needs to be understood as providing a little bit of impetus to the cultural change. The court wants to reflect culture, right? And though the gay theory is no more than 20 years old, it has been presciently and wisely pursued in media and by cultural efforts by this tiny, tiny minority of American citizens in these states, the 1% of the 1%. And now we have a revolution that it seems like it's just going to be confirmed by the High Court. It's just a confirmation. Well, it will be, if the High Court rules as the Texas district judge proposes, he's taking his cue from them, from its earlier decisions, right? The Doma case and the Windsor case in California. So the court is going to reflect what the people seem to want. And the revolution will be accomplished by a kind of a coup, a kind of legal coup that will bring much devastation. Well, to counter the devastation that will accompany such a ruling, which would be next year, there are going to be numerous financial gyrations that may be sparked perhaps by a ruling of this kind, which would be terrifically depressing of all markets. Okay, a ruling like that will cause yippying in the streets among homosexual activists and their flamingo garters. But men like you, who are married, who love your wife, who have children, who have family, you are going to be in a state of mourning for days, weeks, maybe even months. But that's going to affect the marketplace. If it does, you need to make sure that you bolster yourself. I suggest you start your own little business. Okay, that's one of my solutions is local economy, start your own business, not just marry at common law. That's part of my proposal, but also start your own business. And in that direction, I just want to mention Bruce Krebs, who runs Entrepreneur Source. He can get you into a franchise that fits your time, fits your capital, fits your current employment if you have a job elsewhere. And Bruce Krebs is the man to call with questions about this. You don't have to pay for services. He is paid by the franchisor if you end up with a franchise through him. The number is 875-5621. That's 875-5621. And if you're hungry for a pizza, don't forget to support our local economy pizza shops. Jets Pizza in Hickson in the Bilo Shopping Center near the S-Curves. It's jetspizza.com. Call 757-1616. That's 757-1616. And try the deep dish square pizza. And so I'm biting off more than I can chew, I know, but the book that really gets my attention is there's a myth about how the Nazis were against homosexuals. However, homosexualism pervaded the Nazi upper network, and the brown shirts. Rome was a homosexual. There's a discussion about whether Hitler may have been a gay as well. That's not sure, but I want to look at a little bit of the wonderfully erotic and wild ways of these brown shirted men in the National Socialist idea. And we have National Socialism here. Local economy, of course, is the solution. We're going to talk about that conflict.
Check it out this Sunday live on Chattanooga's official NASCAR radio station. Copperhead 1240. Get 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate on a 2014 Camry. This is unheard of. 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate on a new 2014 Camry. You have to get the Capital Toyota at Lee Highway. Get 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate on a 2014 Camry. 0% financing and a $1,000 rebate. Capital Toyota on Lee Highway with a safety that much better.
When your loved one dies, we in the South say he's passed, gone to another place. She left us here. Death is so much more than crying time, but we have to deal with it. You want a funeral home that helps you get through your ordeal. You want a professional, but not one who lacks warmth or sincerity. I'm Josh Jennings. That's what I offer at Hamilton Funeral Home and Cremation Services in Hickson. Care for you. A local owner and operator who keeps your funeral costs down. A great place in which to remember, even celebrate the life in his home. Just call me, 531-3975. This is Josh. Again, the number is 531-3975. Hamilton Funeral Home. Oh, one more thing. Love your neighbor.
Okay.
Picture that curl steam rising from your fresh baked pizza.
Futurist
Flash, it'll take you aloft, teasing all your senses. I'm talking about Jet's Pizza. If you eat out of Jet's Pizza, or take home your steam deep dish square pizza, you'll love Jet's. They use only the best ingredients in a family recipe. Also try the cheesy bread, wings, chicken, or bread with bacon, antipasta or Greek salad. Jet's Pizza and buy low near the S-Curves. Open till 10 p.m. Sunday through Thursday and 11 p.m. Friday and Saturday. You can order online or have it delivered. Jet's
You know Bertie
Pizza.
Wooster's story?
That's Jet's
No, it's
Pizza.
Who's the
Call them now. We'll have it ready when you get there.
The bad guy in that.
1616. That's 757.
Spode.
616.
Ah, never mind.
Hot in the light phone.
I remember.
Clouds. Jet's Pizza. Now
Robert
that's
Spode.
Italian.
With recent changes in
Right.
terms the DJ Pelton tax service for help. Professional advice, confidential service, fair prices, someone to trust all year long. Call 332-3339. These are
Inspiration.
and they're waiting to serve you. Or visit us at 10327 Daisy Pike in Southern Daisy, across
license features the highest quality in all your printing and graphic news, including engineering drawings, offset printing and mailing services, advantage printing and mailing services, your one-stop shop for color graphics, and much, much more. Call 629-1800, 423-629-1800 for Advantage Printing and Mailing Services. 4031 Brainerd Road in Chattanooga. That's 4031 Brainerd Road in Chattanooga.
Hey, do me a favor. Plug my phone in.
423-629-1800 for Advantage Printing and Mailing Services. Your Advantage
Chattanooga.
Yeah, I know.
customer service.
What's your name?
Chrissy, I think. Yeah, that's right.
Outside your home or business, indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold,
It's just hydro ones,
water,
it's not.
those things are prime causes
There's
for indoor air quality.
a gay
Ducts, indoor
revolutionary
air
statement.
they're known as duct
The second paragraph says, "We shall sodomize your sons, emblems of your feeble masculinity, your shallow dreams and vulgar lives.
Rest and indoor air quality contributors to health.
We shall seduce them in your schools, in your dormitories, in your gymnasiums, in your locker rooms, in your sports arenas, and in your seminaries, in your youth groups,
And helping local people with
in
community
your movie
services.
theater bathrooms, in your army bunkhouses."
Ducts, indoor
This was a statement from them.
Yeah, from a noted writer named Michael Swift, the gay revolutionary. It's in the congressional record in 1987.
Wow.
First printed in Gay Community
On your
News.
Twitter account, search Hot News Radio. That's Hot News
I mean, it's
Radio.
unbelievable.
For the latest news and
Of course, it'll never go this far, but
Well, yeah.
That's twitter.com. Then search Hot News Radio. Hot News
The
Radio.
ideal.
I don't know where to start. You've got Plato, you've got Spartacus, you know, the whole. Try to get some of this in. But I don't want it to be, befuddling. I want it to be useful. So now I need to not try to do too much.
WSDQ Dunlap, WEPG South Pittsburgh, The Copperhead, WSDG Sunny Daisy, Chattanooga.
It's fine, I'm doing that.
Hi, David Toulis. A bag of money is now going for about $16,000. If you want to buy or trade your paper notes for some money, real money, 90% fine circulated silver coins, quarters, dimes, you're going to spend about $16,000 in paper. There's been a long drop in silver, a long rise, temporary rise in the paper money. So if you want to get out of paper money and get into some real money, just think about that. I would recommend silver. There's a bit higher premium on circulated 90% now. It's cheaper to buy what's called silver rounds. There are all kinds of rounds out there. They're 1 ounce, 99.99% pure silver. And I think you should think about trading out some of your paper notes, the gay green rectangles, and have some lawful constitutional currency. Well, not currency, but coin. Our show is about local economy. We direct people to their local economy ideas. We have the idea that if you love your neighbor, you will buy local. And the theory of our show is it's based on the marketplace, which of course is based on Christianity, but Christianity is often in the background in our discourse. But we have the idea that small is better than big, that near is better than far, and that personal is better than corporate. And thinking about those things, I'd like you to remember Panera Posse. Every Friday morning at the Panera Bread Store in Hickson is the Panera Posse gathering. I'm always invited, and I usually attend. 6:45 a.m. Coffee, butter, cream cheese, bagels. At 6:45, and we round up the bad guys and put the money back in the bank. Also, if you want a manly kind of car, I would like you to think about River City Car Exchange here in Hickson. A used car lot run by a couple of college chums, young men who provide a great service. They have manly Jeeps and pickups, but they also have the car that might suit your daughter as her first starter car, ones that are not too expensive, but good quality used car. Think of River City Car Exchange, River City Car Exchange in Hickson. Well, thank you for joining me, giving me a couple of minutes of your time. The name is David Toulis. We are live online every day. It's at an internet TV channel, ustream.tv. put in slash channel slash copperhead 1240, copperhead 1240, ustream.tv slash channel slash / of course, copperhead 1240, and you can watch our show live or have it in the background playing. Well, I'm promising you something really juicy, and that is the pink swastika. That's the name of an important history that came out, I think maybe in the 1990s. The authors are Scott Lively and Kevin Abrams. It's a very well documented book about the rise of the National Socialist movement in Germany, with a particular interest in its arts and craftsy, its artisanal flavor, and its origins in Plato. Plato was one of the. If you read the Republic of Plato, you understand where public schools come from. You understand where the best of totalitarianism has its friendly roots. Plato was a pederast, meaning he believed in sex with boys, and many people followed him in this proclivity. The Spartans were, of course, highly sexualized, and the 12-year-olds would be sort of inducted into service of fine, well-built, muscular, chesty kind of guys with their sword belts hanging low on one side and barely covering up things there in the middle. The book has very interesting photographs. There's one where Hitler is in the Berlin Art Museum, standing in front of two very, very well-made men, naked. You can see the reproductive organs of one man, but that man, whose organs are exposed, has his hand leaning over, and is being that hand is held by the other man, also chesty and strong, and covering the second man's privates. But there Hitler is in his little uniform, talking with a subordinate. Everybody is a subordinate to Hitler. But we need to understand where this whole idea of deconstruction comes from. The idea of deconstruction has its influences from the father of National Socialism, who was a man who was mentally defective because of syphilis. He had Nietsche had syphilis, and was at the end of his life he was plainly mad. But up until that time he was a brilliant philosopher, and encouraged much in the way of German culture, and the whole idea of the Superman. The Superman comes from Nietzsche, and of course you can see the Superman in the American myth. For example, we Americans, we are the global Superman, with his chest out, his sword is buckled on, and he has a pistol in the free hand, and of course he's got his clothes on, but he is a superhero, and he wins by force. Force makes right, and that is one of the main ideas of National Socialism and Nietzsche. He was a rabidly anti-Christian homosexual man, Nietzsche was, and he founded the God is Dead movement and contributed to the development of existentialist philosophy. Now, existentialism is also part of the deconstructionism of American law. The Texas judge who overturned the statute and the constitutional provision in the Texas law about marriage, he is engaging in an act of deconstruction. And what happens in deconstruction is you draw meaning out of something. In other words, not that you understand what it says. What you're doing is you're imposing incomprehension on a text, and you show that it's totally fruitless and pointless and says nothing. And that is the reading of the Texas district judge, as other readings have been likened to it in the courts in the past year. And deconstruction is the work, and deconstruction comes from Nietzsche, it comes from Plato, it comes from the Spartans, it comes from Nietzsche, and it comes also from the National Socialist perspective. Now, there's got a conflict here that I'm going to not get into, and that is between revolution and consolidation. And you can see in the Night of the Long Knives, the murder of numerous homosexuals in the Nazi Party. You can see in there the consolidation phase of the National Socialist power. Now, but that is not to there's a kind of mythical story about Nazis oppressing homosexuals, right? The Nazis oppressed Christians, gypsies, Jews, Christians, and homosexuals. Well, that's not true. The homosexual statute. It was a crime in Germany to be a homosexual. But of course, if you were a brown shirt or a member of the party, the SS or the SA, you could be openly homosexual, but you were not persecuted. The law was used to go after certain people who were deemed enemies of the state. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and I'm kind of not being really clear about what I'm trying to get you to understand. But Nietzsche's influence on the Nazis is reflected in all that they did. He said, for example, "Become hard and show no mercy." Now I think that's probably talking about military, right? For evil is man's best force. That's a quote from Friedrich Nietzsche. And the whole idea of power is right. If you have power, you are right. It doesn't matter. There is no God, and so there is no judge of your actions being right or wrong. The attraction of fascism for homosexuals appears in the history of other countries as well. As we noted earlier, pro-Nazi fascist organizations in both England and France were headed by homosexuals. In England, the organization was called the Anglo-German Fellowship, and it was headed by a British homosexual, Guy Francis de Monet Burgess, and Captain John Robert McNamara. In France, the pro-Nazi fascists were represented by two different groups: the Radical Socialist Party, headed by Edward Pfeiffer, and the French Popular Party, headed by Jacques Doriot. Both men were homosexuals. And remember, you know Bertie Wooster, right? Well, Bertie Wooster's great nemesis in the Jeeves books is Roderick Spode. He's never presented as a homosexual, though he does have this sort of effeminate side. After all, he does own the undergarment line Eulalie, and you remember that story, how Bertie's being chased around the house with by this massive dictator, and finally he remembers that Eulalie is the thing that he is the secret that Spode has, the undergarment distributor that he owns a secret interest in, and so he stops being beaten to a pulp by uttering the word Eulalie at the last moment. But homosexuals are part of all the National Socialist movement in the 1920s and the 1930s. We see the roots of Nazism are fundamentally interrelated with the homosexuality of its philosophers. From Plato to Frederick the Great to Nietzsche, the common denominator is homosexual behavior. Certainly not every fascist was homosexual, just as not every homosexual was fascist, I'm reading from the Pink Swastika, Homosexuality in the Nazi Party. But the glaring truth of history is that homosexuals bore a disproportionately large share of the responsibility for the rise of Nazism. And I mentioned the picture of Hitler in the museum, and I'm going to skip over that page. And there's the question of whether Goebbels may have been gay, and Himmler may have been as well. But there's an important character named Rom who was the butch. I'm not sure which side, if he was the female homosexual or the male homosexual, but he was on the losing side in the Night of the Long Knives, which was a consolidation of the party to get rid of the more flamboyant homosexuals, including Rom, who died. He was shot down, as I recall reading once, shot down in the prison cell, calling out, making the fascist Francis Bellamy salute as the Luger's barrels smoked there. Hitler was surrounded by homosexuals. His chauffeur and his one-time personal secretary was gay, Emile Maurice, Hitler was close to a pornographer, Julius Streicher, who was a notorious Jew baiter, originally a school teacher, but he was dismissed by the Nuremberg school authorities following numerous charges of pederasty brought against him. And he was the publisher of a newspaper, Der Stürmer, I guess the Storm maybe, and he was, even at the height of the Nazi regime, he had his paper confiscated because of sexual obscenities displayed and drawings that he published. So in other words, when Nazism consolidated, it went after the gay culture, the camp culture. This book asks, was Hitler a homosexual? Probably not, but he was a sexually frustrated person. And there's a long quote from Hitler's niece, Gaily, who had, there's a lengthy quote that goes for a page talking about Hitler's bizarre sexual interests. 2 of Hitler's 4 mistresses committed suicide. He may have been interested in coprophilia, which is to say sexual arousal from feces. I mean, he may have had some interest in that, and which of course is connected to homosexuality. That's part of the gay culture of total license. You have to understand that I'm not insisting on this. I'm just saying that if you're gay, if you're a homosexual, you believe in total license. You believe in the power of the will. The will controls. There is no morality, you see, that controls. Now, let's see. Hitler strengthened his rhetoric against homosexuality in society at large. Okay, so publicly Hitler was against it, but he was surrounding himself with gay troopers. An article that appeared in the official Nazi newspaper in 1930 went so far as to threaten homosexuals with extermination. Once again, this was purely theatrical. Adolf Brand, whose openly homosexual magazine Der Eine was by this time widely read in Germany, responded to the Nazi article with one of his own. He says in an article quoted in a book, "Men such as Captain Rome are, to our knowledge, no rarity at all in the National Socialist Party. It rather teems there with homosexuals of all kinds, and the joy of man in man, which has been slandered in their papers so often as an oriental vice, although the Edda frankly extols it as the highest virtue of the Teutons, blossoms around their campfires and is cultivated and fostered by them in a way done in no other male union that is reared on party politics." So there's a discussion about Rome, again, who's shot down. He's a gay activist, a gay party man, faithful Nazi. And so this is consolidation of the party when the gays run the party, but certain gays are on the outs, right? These may be the female guy types. And the book goes into this book called The Pink Swastika, goes into a discussion of the German ordinance, how it outlaws homosexuality, as does the new statute in Uganda that makes homosexual acts punishable by a minimum of 14 years in prison. When Hitler came to power, he used the anti-homosexual law as a means of tracking down and punishing those homosexuals who, in the words of one victim, had defended the Weimar Republic and who had tried to forestall the Nazi threat. In February of 1933, Hitler banned pornography, homosexual bars and bathhouses, and groups which promoted gay rights. Ostensibly, this decree was a blanket condemnation of all homosexual activity in Germany. But, say Scott Lively and Kevin Abrams, in practice, it served as just another reason to find and destroy anti-Nazi groups and individuals. So that may be what's happening right now in Russia. Hitler, admits Osterhuis and Kennedy, employed the charge of homosexuality primarily as a means to eliminate political opponents, both inside his party and out. There's so let's see. The charge of homosexuality was convenient for the Nazis to use against their political enemies because it was so difficult to defend against and so easy to justify to the populace. So since long before the Nazis, homosexuals generally lived clandestine lives. So Hitler sacks the people at the Sex Research Institute in Berlin, and for all intents and purposes, that group served as the headquarters for the effeminate branch of the German gay rights movement. For this reason alone, the butch homosexuals of the Nazi Party might have destroyed the institute. Indeed, throughout the preceding years, the Nazis had increasingly harassed Hirschfeld personally. So now there are a couple more things I wanted to just mention from this history that I just happened to find on my bookcase. Yeah, there's the picture of the subordinate that I mentioned, Hitler standing with in front of the 2 gay men in the museum, is none other than Mussolini, who is looking Il Duce, looking over to his broken cross armbanded German colleague there on his left. Now, the other thing that we need to understand that this revolution is taking place culturally. The High Court wants to impose it legally, and the devastation will be, it'll be a 25 to 75 year legal melee, a chaos that lasts 25 to 75 years at the minimum, because things like this are not readily undone. There are cases that still control today from the 1850s, right? They still control today, and that's because legal decisions have a way of enduring and of controlling opinions that follow. And you've got to remember, despite what the judge in the Texas opinion said, judges' opinions and high court opinions are not law. They're just opinions. But since so many people in legislatures are lawyers, we have a very bleak future, because they will view anything the high court says as a law. Whereas if you, my listener, were in the General Assembly, not being a lawyer, you would realize that opinions of high courts are just that, opinions, and you can steadfastly regard them. Well, in the library in the Congressional Record in the 1980s, there was a copy of an essay by Michael Swift called "The Gay Revolutionary," first printed in Gay Community News in February 1987. And I want to read you just a little bit of this document, because the revolution is not it's not enough for it to be simply cultural. It has to be coerced. And if you think if you think that a Christian photographer being forced to take a gay wedding, so-called, photograph a gay wedding, he's not free to say no, right, without causing a lawsuit to be filed under some ordinance or statute against him. If you think that's coercion, just listen to what the gay revolutionaries want. And these are people, these are the 1% of the 1% of the 1% who have a great appeal to the well-intentioned public. You need to understand that the men whom you sometimes think favorably of, because you are generous and somewhat egalitarian in your thinking, you need to understand that this is the armor-piercing shell cap, the tungsten or uranium-tipped cap of the armor-piercing shell. And my name, by the way, if you're just joining us, is David Toulis. Our show is Nuganomics.com. But this essay by Michael Swift is called "The Gay Revolutionary," and Gramsci would be proud, though Gramsci, the Euro-communist thinker, might possibly have been a little bit ashamed about some of these things. He says, "We shall sodomize your sons, emblems of your feeble masculinity, of your shallow dreams and vulgar lies. We shall seduce them in your schools, in your dormitories, in your gymnasiums, in your locker rooms, in your sports arenas, in your seminaries, in your youth groups." Of course, in Germany, that was the Wandervogel, the Boy Scouts. "In your movie theater bathrooms, in your army bunkhouses." Do we have, the statute against sodomy in the military is on its way out, according to news reports this week. "In your truck stops, in your all-male clubs, in your houses of Congress, wherever men are, with men together, your sons will become our minions and do our bidding. They will be recast in our image. They will come to crave and adore us. Women, you cry for your freedom. You say you are no longer satisfied with men. They make you unhappy." This is the lesbian separatist movement. We connoisseurs of the masculine face, the masculine physique, shall take your men from you then. We will amuse them. We will embrace them when they weep. Women, you say you wish to live with each other instead of men. Then go ahead and be with each other. We shall give your men pleasures they have never known before, because we are foremost men too, and only one man knows how to truly please another man. Only one man can understand with depth and feeling the mind and body of another man. All laws, he says, banning homosexual activity will be revoked. Instead, legislation shall be passed which engenders love between men. You can think about, just think, pro-gay sex ed training, mandatory sensitivity training at your corporation, right? All homosexuals must stand together as brothers, he says. We must be united artistically, philosophically, socially, politically, and financially. We will triumph only when we present a common face to the vicious heterosexual enemy. Of course, think suppression of pro-family ministries and outlets. If you dare to cry faggot, fairy, queer at us, we will stab you in your cowardly hearts and defile your dead puny bodies. Think of speech codes, right? Fines. We shall write poems of the love between men. We shall stage plays in which men openly caress men. We will make films about the love between heroic men, which will replace the cheap, superficial, sentimental, insipid, juvenile, heterosexual infatuations presently dominating your cinema screens. And it goes on, there will be no compromises. We are not middle-class weaklings, highly intelligent. We are the natural aristocrats of the human race. Think of Plato. And steely-minded aristocrats never settle for less. The family unit, spawning ground of lies, betrayals, mediocrity, hypocrisy, and violence, this gay activist says, will be abolished. The family unit will only dampen imagination, and it curbs free will. It must be eliminated. Well, this is David Toulis, and we believe in capital. We believe in you. Hang on.
This is Bitcoin right now.
What's zero?
It's at 480 right now.
$480.
Right.
What's the top?
Top is 630.
Thanks for letting me know.
You're welcome.
So it's gone from 680 to 430 today? Is that today?
It's gone from 630 to 480 in the course of a few hours.
Okay. All right, again. Repeat.
630 to 480 over the course of about yesterday and today.
On a new 2014 Camry, you have to get the Capital Toyota off the highway. Get
This phone's handy.
financing and a $1,000 rebate on a 2014 Camry.
What is the current value of Bitcoin?
$1,000 rebate. Capital Toyota on Lee Highway with a that much better.
Okay.
Yes.
Are you tired of working in corporate America or have you recently lost your job and would like to consider owning your own business? If you are, please call me because I can help you look at
I think this is
franchise
pretty devastating,
business
but
opportunities.
I may get in trouble for it, but you know, it won't be with Sam.
No, not at all. We can say whatever we want here.
I can't imagine being. I wouldn't know what to do either. If I were at Christian radio, you know, I would.
They'd throw you out.
They would throw me out. I mean,
We're too abrasive.
I'm not abrasive. I'm
No,
just
you're not abrasive.
giving facts, you know.
Right. If you give out the facts, they get mad because the facts are disconcerting. They're uncomfortable.
We in the South said he's passed, going to another place.
No.
She left us.
I think, in one sense, we are the minority report, but in another sense, we are the majority. I mean, most people agree with us.
Yeah.
We just have to give them intellectual and spiritual insight so that they'll agree with us and say, well, he's right. We need to make it a bold argument, and they'll say, yeah, that's what I believe. I mean, we need to give people words for what they already believe. We need to give them words for what they feel about things. It's something they haven't thought much about. They just don't like gays, and that's all. They have a negative perspective. We need to have a positive perspective, which then has its negative argument.
Right, and you're not going to hear this anywhere else. It's on the radio.
And your flash may take you aloft, teasing all your
But you know,
I'm talking
I've been
about
in such a despair,
just
just
jets and hits it. Or
just feeling
your
useless, just
steel.
feeling
Dish square pizza, you'll love jets. They use only the best
listen to our
ingredients.
show.
That
Why are
is
we doing this? I
Also
just
try
don't
the
know.
cheesy bread.
I have no sense of
Or breaded bacon.
our value. I have a sense of feedback. My website's dead. You know, I get 1,600 people a month on my website. I can't make it more valuable. I can't make it more useful.
Well, these things come with time. When we get these shows on our radio station, we move up to FM. I think then we'll see things change. And we'll be able to get a, what's that box you get that tells you your ratings. We'll be able to get one of those, and we'll know what our listenership is. It can only go up there. It's just until then we're in a bit of a doldrum, but it's a learning experience.
Well, I've been learning every day something. I'm fighting fighting that. I think today I did better. Did you hear any of what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of us.
I'm listening.
Am I doing us?
No, not that I've been noticing.
I think I've been better today. On Ustrea, I'm kicking myself. I'm still doing
Its curators
Well, it's a natural speech
climbed to
pattern.
the pilot seat of the North American T-28 Trojan, peered into the cockpit of a 1946 Terracraft, and enjoyed a scenic trip over Chattanooga in a 1958 Piper Apache. We're open for individual or group tours, and we welcome school groups, police and Girl Scout troops, or any group interested in learning about aviation history and what we do. Please visit our website at hicksonflightmuseum.org. 423-239. Check us out on Facebook. The Copperhead 2040, Southern Rock, Keeping Country, Tennessee Talk, Copperhead 1240.
Get the latest news and information now. On your Twitter account, search Hot News Radio. That's Hot News Radio. For the latest news and information, go to Hot News Radio. That's twitter.com. Then search Hot News Radio. Hot News Radio is a service of Copperhead 1240. Live from Chattanooga, Tennessee, it's Newconomics with David Toulis.
Hi, David Toulis. Our show is newconomics.com, brought to you by Capital Toyota. The Toyota is the best line of car that you can ride. I've got 3 of them going. If you test drive a Toyota today, you can get a $25 gift card from Target. Just call 888-404-9970 to make an appointment. That's 888-404-9970. Make an appointment to test drive a Toyota with Capital Toyota over on Lee Highway by the foot of the airport. And that number can also connect you with sales or service or parts or the detailing center. You can have your car detailed, in other words, perfectly cleaned up for $199. And of course, if you have service at Capital Toyota, your car is washed for free. So think of getting, I know you're not a Target shopper, but your wife is. So if you want to buy her a gift, test drive that car at Capital and ask for the Target $25 gift card. And there you go. You can buy that lingerie for her at Target and not have to pay anything for it. And you also get to test drive the best line of car. Now think about the Camry, right? The Camry has a $1,000 rebate on it if you get a loan through the dealership, a loan for which you pay 0% APR. And also just wanted to mention Panera Posse is every Friday morning at 6:45 in Hickson at the Hickson Panera Bread Store. Coffee, bagels. We round up the bad guys and put the money back in the bank. And I wanted to let you know also about Ducts, the indoor air professionals, formerly known as Duct Busters. This little business with a highly trained staff will clean the ductwork out in your house or in your plant and reduce air pollution and maybe take care of some of the mold problems that you think are besetting the nostrils of your staff, even your secretary. She's got a lot of problems with nasal drip, and maybe it's ductwork that needs to be cleaned up. Well, I spent the morning looking at a book called Modern Fascism by a very important writer named Jean Edward Veith. The subtitle is Liquidating the Judeo-Christian Worldview, and modern fascism is afoot. We've been under a sort of fascistic political economy for a long time. I would trace it. I wouldn't go back so far as the time of Lincoln, though that of course began the process of national centralization and unitary government, which is the unworkable thing above us now, right? The unworkable, irredeemable thing that can't be fixed. But I was looking at Chattanooga.com today, and there's a story about a Senate Judiciary Committee approving a resolution, and the headline says, "Designed to lead to balanced federal budgets." Well, there's a quote from Senator Brian Kelsey from Germantown, West Tennessee. He says, "The federal government should live within its means and stop adding to its $17 trillion debt." And he hopes that there might be a convention of the states pursuant to Article 5 of the Constitution. Well, a convention would likely be a disaster, and there's not time. The peak of national economy, the peak of national shares, we are already there, and so the That peak, of course, could be a decade long, but the peak is insolvency, or should I say, in the solvency of the national power has been reached, and so there will be only simulacrum reforms, only pretend reforms, fake ones, right? Fake reforms that seem to be addressing intractable financial problems, though never are moral questions addressed by the good people. Well, let's see. I wanted to mention Bitcoin, the abstract of abstract monetary units. According to Russell the Kid, who runs our Generation Z program, in the past day has gone from 630 paper bucks per coin to 480 paper bucks per coin.
Actually, I just got an update. I just got this app here. It has gone back up to $584.40 US dollars.
Okay, fluctuating medium of exchange. Thanks, Russell.
You're welcome. The collapse of Mt. Gox has not helped anything at all, but I just want to add that in there.
Right. You will listen to Generation Z from 11 to 1 in our current schedule, and Russell follows that issue, as well as the great, great topic of 3D printing every day. Very lively, well-informed program that has a steeped in tech questions, which I know you are interested in. So we were talking, and if you want to buy a bag of money, by the way, a bag of money now costs you $16,000, which is to say $1,000 in real money that is very heavy costs about $16,000 in paper banknotes. Well, we have coming bizarre things in the law, and if the High Court follows U.S. District Court leadership, if you will, in ratifying its gay idea, because the High Court wants to impose the gay theory on all of society, all the 50 states, every marriage. It's going to pretend, possibly, to reject federalism as the legal structure of the states vis-a-vis the federal government, and impose a unitary standard, just as it did with the pretended Roe versus Wade decision in 1973, which everyone thought was law, but it's not. But everyone pretended that it was, and they just believed the lie that a court opinion, which is just a bunch of paper, can actually mean anything and have any effect on people far, far away here in Chattanooga in local economy. But there's a weird backlash coming. Well, there's a major backlash coming if this decision goes through in Washington in the High Court next year. And think of the gay Times diner. Think of them being forced to cater to a Christian Reconstructionist, a Christian who believes in the law of God, who understands the Bible to declare sodomy to be a capital offense. You know, a man like that. The Reconstructionists are people who take seriously what God declares in the area of his commands in his case law. But in the gay idea, the Reconstructionists can force the Poofter couple who run the bakery to cater their dinner. What about the Jewish bagel shop being coerced to sell every Friday morning 10 bags of bagels and bring it to the college group, which is comprised of people who are historical revisionists, who have read Racine, who have read Dr. Arthur Butts' book, The Greatest Hoax of the 20th Century. The subtitle is something about the pretended extermination of the Jews. How would it be that the bagel shop owner can't say no? Right? The kosher kitchen that serves the Jewish Federation of Greater Chattanooga is forced to serve the revisionist society, which comes calling, saying it would like to order bagels and other ethnic food. What about the MLK Club that is required to admit as a candidate for office a member of the League of the South, which is a Southern nationalist group that cares about Southern culture and the agrarian way of life, or maybe even a federal agent who's a member of the KKK. What if that federal agent, as part of his role, right, to try to root out corruption in the KKK, comes to the MLK Club and says, you know, you need to let me in. I need to come in. These are all the kinds of things that the gay theory that the whole idea of national economy allow with perfect tranquility. These things are simply the way things are. This is how things should be. Of course, you understand that we have the will to power. Right? There's no right or wrong anymore. There's no private association. There's no right to contract even in this regime. A basic property right is the right to say no, to say yes and to say no. Yes, I will contract with you. I will agree to serve you for this amount of money, or I will agree to an exchange of services for money. That's the right to contract. You also have a right to say no. And so if you take the gay theory far enough, which they don't know when to stop. These people do not know when to stop. And when finally these things pass and there is ruination left and right, there are lawsuits filed, there are Human Rights Commission administrative pleadings made by the 1% of the 1%, the gay population, there's going to be such hatred that builds up. And I'm going to be there talking about that. If that happens and I'm still alive, I'm going to be here to say, well, look, you need to forgive and you need to be forbearing and you need to be gracious. If you're not a Christian, but if you were, I would appeal to the scriptures and the need to when the Roman soldier assails you on the side of the way and demands that you carry his bags half a mile, you say, well, could I carry it another half mile for you until you get to the base? That's the Christian way, right? That's the Christian ethic of service, even under oppression. The Christian ethic which says even if your employer, your master, is a lout, even if he's overbearing, even if he's pugnacious and hateful and accusatory and unjust to you, you still have to serve him and to prosper his interests. You see, the Christian theory is totally different from the gay theory. The gay theory has nothing about grace. It's all about me. I want to have orgasms whenever and wherever and with whomever I want. And there is no control over sex. There is no control of sex at all. There's no moral control. There is no right. There is no wrong. And of course, that is the will to power. And the night of the long knives will come again, perhaps, in our country. There will be purges, if you will, of people who are the wrong kind of gays, even by the gay establishment. That there can't be a gay establishment in a way because there aren't enough of them. They don't have children. They are going to lose their distinction before too long. Well, there's a coming backlash against the gay theory, and it will become virulent and violent in some quarters, maybe in Idaho, in Oklahoma, Montana, places like that. If you're a gay, you better not show yourself because the evil of the federal imposition of its opinion on Montana law will be too much for many people to bear. And so the gay population will probably want to relocate to New Orleans or other friendly places, maybe San Francisco. Another backlash will be the decline of power of the states. Of course, that's what the anti-federalist position is. If the High Court rules next year that there is a national definition of marriage, and it pretends, as it will, that no state can define marriage anymore, there will be a return, perhaps quickly, to the ancient form of marriage, and that is marriage by right. If you buy a Bible at a bookshop in Northgate Mall or in Hamilton Place Mall, there will be in the frontis pages that have family records. They're still there. And marriage dates, children's birth dates, parents' decease, these things are part of the record. And states do that now. We have death certificates. I know I'm trying to get a death certificate for my father from the Office of Vital Statistics in Nashville, a certified copy. It costs $15 to get one. The state handles all kinds of records, but as the state fades in relevance, thanks to the internet and thanks to the free market, thanks to local economy, things that we now rely on the state for will be returning for use and for exploitation even by the people. And one of those will be marriage. Marriage will come back to the people. It will no longer belong to the state. So we can see, what I'm seeing is there's a bright cloud along the edge of this very dark storm cloud, which is the gay attack on marriage. Gays don't want to. They don't want to just have what you have. Okay, they want to redefine a foundation of culture. But the definition that they want to redefine is only that part of marriage which belongs to the state. You've got to understand that. You have a right to marry regardless of what the statute is. And that's called common law marriage. And common law marriage is widely misunderstood. I think people think that if you're married at common law, that you're just shacking up with your woman. Well, no. Common law marriage is established just as statutory marriage is. And here's how. And I write about this, by the way, at Nuganomics.com, our little website. My name is David Toulis, and I am the editor at Nuganomics.com here at Copperhead. Here's how you establish a common law marriage. And it's the same thing that happens, it's the same ritual that happens in statutory marriage, except in the statutory regime, you just have an official observation of what you have decided before God to do. In a common law marriage, you have, number one, you have to contract the union in a common law state. Okay, that would be Alabama. Go rent a church in Alabama and have your festivities there. Okay, that's number one. Number two, common law marriage is the holding forth of two people as married. So he says he's married to her. She says she's married to him. Okay, that's holding forth, and people accept that she is now David Toulis, Mrs. David Toulis. Number three is consummation. You make love to your wife and you break the hymen. Okay, that's sexual relations. That's consummation. You own her, she owns you. You are mutually bound together in one flesh before God. That's how God designed sex. Sex is to be used only in marriage. No other sex is lawful. No other sex is right in God's eyes. And so he has a wall around sex. That wall is marriage. If you are inside the wall, you have liberty and license to make love to your wife. If you're outside the wall, you don't have authority to do anything. You can't make love to anybody, man or woman. Okay, they're all outliers. All sexual activity outside of marriage is an outlier, illicit activity, whether it's man, guy, gal, whatever. Okay, pornography, those are all outliers. They're not allowed. They're either unclean or unnatural or vile acts. The law books have various usages describing illicit activity. So what happens is in common law marriage. The fourth one is cohabitation. If you cohabit with your common law wife, she has a property right in you, and you in her, that is enforceable in court. Okay, that's why it's important. Is the marriage enforceable? Are her rights enforceable? Her right to conjugal time, her right to estate, her right to have your children as legitimate children and not bastards. Okay, you don't want to have bastards coming from your loins. You want to have lawful children, and you can have lawful children in a common law marriage, right? And so the fact that it's lawfully consummated, cohabiting, and with consent, of course, consent would be kind of step 1.1. You have to have consent of both parties, and they have to be of the right age. So those are about 4 or 5 points that make a common law marriage. That's going to come back. If the state's marriage regimes are overturned by a poofter case coming out of Nashville or out of Texas, you're going to have common law. No homosexual can have a common law marriage. Okay, it just can't. He just can't. So what will happen is, if Tennessee, in its folly, thinks somehow that it can't still regulate marriage after the high court decision, it will probably be under a lot of pressure to reinstate common law marriage. And so what's happening, that will be a retreat from the marriage regime that it has a monopoly upon now. Do you understand that? It has a monopoly. Marriage is cartelized by the state. Just one more thing that the state pretends to own, which it really doesn't. And so what will happen is, in the backlash, is there will be people who turn away from statutory marriages. They will say, I want to marry as a common right, and I'm not going to ask permission for it. I'm going to ask God for permission, and I'm going to marry my intended. We don't need the state. The state does not have any claims upon this. And so Tennessee will reinstate common law marriage, which still exists, except it exists, in fact, though the marital regime of statutes preempted. Okay, it's preempted for now by statute. And let's see. there'll be a need to create new forms of recording marriages. Okay, the Bible is fine, but there will arise for-profit organizations which keep records of marriages. Right, the state may want to continue keeping records of marriages, but there will be other alternatives for the keeping of record of common law marriage. There will be private registries, perhaps bans, the ancient right of announcing marriages ahead of time to assure that the woman's a virgin. Those may come back. Only gays, in the end, only homosexuals will have statutory marriages because remember, a license, as in a marriage license, is permission to do something which is otherwise illegal, unlawful, or a crime. And homosexuality, in the real world that God has made, it is a crime to be a homosexual. It is a criminal act to be homosexual. In the 13 colonies, it was a capital offense. In the enlightened country of Uganda, it is a felony offense to be a homosexual, or rather to commit a homosexual act, rather, I should say. So in the future, the bright future, past the disaster of a possible pro-gay high court ruling, only gays, the 1%, will have their marriages under statute. Other people who are sensible will say, well, I'm going to marry by right. I'm not going to ask the state permission. But the gays have to go to the state for permission to marry. They have to, because what they're doing is illegal, and that's why you have a licensing regime, to make something otherwise illegal or illicit lawful. And in the same way, only careless parents will have their children in the government factory school. Why? Because the government factory school will be shown to be just a shell, a pretense, not real education at all, not serving families at all, but really serving industry, serving the surveillance state, serving the nonprofit data mining sector. There'll be, of course, a lot of anger over the gay ruling, but that will fade, and people will turn to their positive alternative, which is the exercise of rights. And in a way, you could say, if you are a free market person, as I am, there is potential benefit in the breakup of marriage monopolies held by the 50 states. This might be the way, this disaster in which the law declares a falsehood. That might be a way of destroying the cartelization, the monopolization of marriage by general assemblies around the country. And if Tennessee gets out of the marriage business, then common law marriage, of course, is available. You can always marry, okay? You can marry by right. You don't have to ask government to do what your own desires and her own consent imply are the necessity of the moment, which is to say, wedding and the guest list, the right bottle of wine, and whom you plan to have cater the dinner. These are important questions, and that's the necessity that will come. And you can do that at common law. Think about that. You know, my whole website is about this whole idea, the whole idea of the crisis and the life past the crisis. We face a disaster nationally in the economy. We have a paper money economy. We have extensions of credit that are unbelievable, will never be paid back. The gay theory is the same kind. It is only debt. The gay theory has no capital in it. It has no future. And of course, Jerry Mitchell, the city councilman, believes that two men having anal sex are the same as you, my listener, the good man, making sweet love to your wife there upstairs in the bedroom after the children are asleep, and you can hear the crickets chirping outside as you enjoy your sweetheart. Jerry Mitchell and people like him, Chris Anderson most notably, think that those are the same. They are the same. The two forms of sexual love are the same. Well, they're not. They're not. And you know that. Even though you're not a Christian, you know that there's something fundamentally wrong about the gay proposal and the gay wash that will come with laws, coercion, force, threats, and an attempt to nationalize the states, to nationalize the people. We've had enough nationalization. We have had enough of the good people. Are you tired of the good people as I am? Well, my name is David Toulis, and the good people, I think they're tired of you, and I hope they're tired of me. So let's get together again tomorrow. And remember, Panera Posse, every Friday, 6:45 a.m. at the Panera Bread Store in Hickson. I'm David Toulis, the editor at nukenomics.com.
I'm checking your box for you.
Oh, that was hard. That was a hard program.
It was a good show.
Okay, well, let's work on this little ad. Now, I'd like you to produce it, okay?
Sure.
Let's just get the script together.
Now, I hope I haven't lost the piece of paper that I told you not to lose.
I handed it back to you.
I know you did. It's in here somewhere.
Let's see.
Oh, here it is.
Okay, good.
All right.
Yeah, you were reading from it. That'll be all right.
Man,
I got this neat little app for my phone that'll alert me if Bitcoin goes below $100.